A lot of major roster news for the Philadelphia Eagles after that preseason finale. Looking ahead to Tuesday's roster cuts. Let's get into it here on the show. You're watching Eagles Now. My name is Chase Sr. A happy Sunday to everybody, and I hope you've all had a fantastic weekend. By the way, a reminder, all teams across the NFL have to trim their rosters down to 53 players by 4 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday. And, of course, once we get our hands on that initial 53, we'll provide you with some coverage and some content here on the show. That's why you subscribe to the channel. We're closing in on 125,000 subscribers, 176 people away from reaching another milestone. So lock us in for daily and year-round coverage of the E-A-G-L-E-S Eagles. All right, let's get into it here. And just some takeaways that I have from what transpired in the preseason, some of the big roster storylines to monitor here, and some potential decisions that the Eagles are facing. And this all has to do with a lot of the buzz. It's happening with Philadelphia, but really all across the NFL. And I think that by playing the last 2 preseason games, after getting traded for by Howie Roseman, cornerback Jacorian Bennett really helped his case to start at cornerback 2, opposite of Quinyon Mitchell. And when you think about what Bennett did in the preseason, he made the plays that Kelee Ringo and Adoree Jackson didn't. Of course, Bennett is trying to get caught up and acclimated with Vic Fangio's defense, and that's why he played a lot in those final 2 preseason games. But I thought he played well, and I thought vividly he passed the eye test. Speed, 4.3 guy. Sticky coverage, always close by the receiver. Ball skills, making plays on the rock. And the eye test tells me he might be the best option over Adoree Jackson, over Kelee Ringo. And if that's the case and he plays well, what a move by Howie Roseman to trade your 5th best defensive tackle for a starting caliber corner. And I know a lot of people will look at Bennett's Pro Football Focus grades. I've seen some people in the comment section, and a lot of people have said he's really not that good. You got to start Adoree. You got to start Kelee. Give him a chance. I don't really care about the Pro Football Focus numbers all the time, especially when you can look at numbers like this. Bennett, among all corners with 450-plus snaps last year, was 3rd in catches allowed, tied for 10th in targets, 2nd in receiving yards allowed, gave up 0 touchdowns in coverage. That was tied for 1st. 9 PBUs, tied for 4th. He allowed a QBR of 62.4 that ranked 6th among corners. And when he had to go up against a guy like Jamar Chase, he gave up 3 catches for 16 yards, no touchdowns, and had 1 pass breakup. And we're talking about a player here in Bennett who moves well. I like the physicality to his game. And in 11 starts, 24 games in his career, when he's been able to stay healthy, a couple of shoulder issues, that is a little bit of a problem, he has 11 PBUs. And so with all of that being said, when you think about the Eagles having to cut this roster down to 53 players, I would not be surprised if Kelee Ringo got traded. Hasn't developed to the liking of what the Eagles had hoped. And maybe you trade him away. You get some type of compensation. Maybe a player who can help you somewhere. Maybe a future draft pick. And you give him a fresh opportunity and a clean slate to become a solid player elsewhere, to give him an opportunity to play. Because when I watch Kelee Ringo right now, he doesn't look or play like a confident player. You know who is playing like a confident player and who keeps flashing and popping up? It's Byron Young, the defensive tackle. He might make this team as defensive tackle 5 or defensive tackle 6 if the Eagles hold on to 6 defensive tackles, because they're pretty deep there when you have Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, and Moro Ajomo. Then you drafted a guy like Ty Robinson, and I think the Eagles really like Gabe Hall too. And BY, as Vic Fangio calls him, was a 2023 third-round pick out of Alabama by the Raiders. Didn't work out for the Raiders, but we know that Howie has done a lot of work in bringing in players with a lot of draft pedigree. BY the latest. BY was also on the Eagles' 2024 active roster the first 7 weeks last year before he landed on season-ending IR. And Vic Fangio keeps talking about Byron Young. If you are catching the attention of Vic Fangio, you're doing something right. And I think that tells me that Fangio wants him on this ball club. And so these are two rotational backup depth pieces at defensive tackle who bring you some juice. Gabe Hall, UDFA from last year out of Baylor, and Byron Young. And I think the Eagles might be forced into a situation where they have to hold on to 6 defensive tackles. And then you cut somebody somewhere else. Eli Ricks, don't think he played well enough to make the team. Can you get by with 2 safeties on the 53 and cut a Tristan McCullum and Andre Sam? Because you have Cooper DeJean who can also play safety. That's the type of roster Tetris and roster gymnastics that I speak of. Do you get rid of an offensive lineman so that you can be set here and have a player like this on your team? Another topic that I want to touch on too, is we have a slew of topics obviously that we're getting to here today. Is Kyle McCord good enough to make the 53-man roster? Eagles used that 6th-round pick on him coming out of Syracuse. I really liked what he did at Syracuse. Hung tough in the pocket, good pocket mobility, good arm strength. I thought he did a good job of processing. He can layer balls and put some touch on some throws. He is not mobile, but he, at Syracuse, had this jump in confidence with lesser weapons compared to what he had at Ohio State. He played well. He was extremely accurate, and his numbers were really impressive. Like, he threw for, I think, around 4,700 yards. He had about 37 touchdowns, something in that neighborhood, and he made some nice plays throughout the preseason. Had some nice throws. He wasn't helped out by some of the drops that his receivers had on Friday night. But I just don't know if he did enough to make the 53. And do you have a lot of confidence in him being QB3? Do you have enough confidence in him being QB2? No way. A sneaky issue that the Eagles have with their second-string quarterback right now is that Tanner McKee has a finger injury. And on Friday night, he did not take his right hand out of his hoodie. He was doing everything with his left hand. And Nick Sirianni said, we'll see if he's available for the season opener against the Dallas Cowboys. We're talking about the best backup quarterback in the NFL, in my opinion. And we're talking about a guy in Tanner McKee who could start for a handful of teams. If he is not ready to go against Dallas, that means that Kyle McCord would be one injury away to Jalen Hurts, knock on wood, hopefully that doesn't happen, from having to be the quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles. I just don't see how that would work out for Philadelphia. I mean, it's not saying that Kyle McCord isn't going to be a good player down the road, but he was telegraphing passes. A lot of his reads were dumbed down to one side of the field. He threw one pick, but he should have thrown more because he was staring all of his receivers down. And while I like the arm strength and the accuracy was there at Syracuse, and with lesser weapons, he played better and he gained confidence that he lost at Ohio State, I just don't have a ton of confidence in Kyle McCord. I like him as a developmental player. You'd run the risk if you cut him of him not being able to come back on the practice squad because he plays quarterback and another team might be bullish on him. They might want to develop him on their team. Ideally, you could have him on the practice squad and use that time to develop him. But there is a stark difference between what Kyle McCord did this preseason as a rookie and what Tanner McKee did as a rookie. Right away, we were saying, Tanner McKee, this kid's good. He's legit. He can ball. With Kyle McCord, leaving a lot of meat on the bone. And this is very fascinating. And I referenced this after that preseason finale watch party. Could the Eagles reunite with Kenny Pickett? Now, Philadelphia traded him away because they wanted Tanner McKee to be their second-string quarterback behind Jalen Hurts, and frankly, McKee is the much better player compared to Pickett. The Eagles got back DTR, who did not play a single snap in the preseason finale against the New York Jets. That tells me the Eagles like Kyle McCord better than DTR. They didn't need to see anything more from DTR. But the Browns are in a spot here where Joe Flacco is going to start. You have Dylan Gabriel. You have Shadur Sanders. You have Kenny Pickett. It's pretty rare for an NFL team to have 4 quarterbacks on the 53 because it takes a position or two of depth out from another position. But if the Browns were to cut Kenny Pickett, or if they would be willing to trade him, I would be down for a reunion with Kenny Pickett. Do I want him as my QB2? No. That is Tanner McKee's spot. But if McKee isn't ready for the start of the season, you do have confidence in what Kenny Pickett can do. He knows this offense. He knows these playmakers. The Eagles know him. And I thought that when he had a full week of prep going up against the Cowboys in Week 17, he played pretty damn well in that first half. Should Kyle McCord make the 53-man roster? I want you to answer that question for me down in the comment section. Simply type on or off. A lot more to get to here because there is so much roster buzz with this Philadelphia Eagles team. But got to give a shout out to our sponsor, our friends at Prize Picks, the #1 daily fantasy sports app in the game. Sign up today, create an account, prizepicks.com/CLNS. And when you do that, you get $50 when you play your first $5 lineup. You can win big up to 2,000 times your money. Prize Picks is available in 45 states. You pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. You can get your picks in and get in on the action in less than 60 seconds, and your withdrawals fast and secure. Test your ball knowledge with Prize Picks. It makes game day so much more fun. And as we look ahead to Week 1, I know we don't like the Dallas Cowboys. We think that Dak Prescott is mid. But Prize Picks has a great Dak special. All he has to do is throw for more than a half passing yard, and you can chalk that up as an easy win on your lineup. So we'll go more on the Dak, more than half passing yard, more than Jalen Hurts, half rushing and receiving touchdown. And then we'll go with the more on Saquon Barkley's 92.5 rushing yards. So get $5 or play $5, get $50 instantly in lineups. This is real money sports action made easy. Claim your $50 now at prizepicks.com/CLNS. All right, we move forward on the show. Thanks to Prize Picks for making it all possible. At the defensive end edge rusher outside linebacker spot, Obu Okoronkwo looked really good at edge. And throughout the preseason, he has made more plays and he has looked better than Azeez Ojulari. Now, he's an older player than Azeez Ojulari. When healthy, Ojulari has been very productive at getting after the quarterback. He's another Georgia player that Howie Roseman really likes. The Eagles signed him for cheap. And Okoronkwo was a player who was a pretty good rotational pass rusher for Jim Schwartz with the Cleveland Browns the last couple of years. Prior to that, he had 5.5 sacks in 2022 with the Houston Texans. Now, D'Amico Ryans, Jim Schwartz, they are playing with that wide 9-4-3 front. As we know with Vic Fangio, it's more of that hybrid 3-4, but sometimes he has 4 down defensive linemen. What does Howie Roseman do here? This is another question that I have pertaining to the Eagles' 53-man roster, the initial one, because the Eagles have some really difficult decisions to make. This team might not be as deep as it was last year. Now, they still have star players. They still have high-level guys from 1 to 25, 1 to 30, probably the most talented team in the National Football League. But their depth pieces, probably not as good as they were last year. And so when it comes down to a decision like this, Okoronkwo, Ojulari, who does Howie Roseman go with? Another issue here at that same position is what does Philadelphia do with Antoine Powell-Ryland, 6th-round pick out of Virginia Tech, who was very disruptive in college with getting sacks on the quarterback, forcing fumbles, TFLs, and constantly getting in the backfield. Up until Friday night, he had not done anything throughout training camp or in the preseason. It was very silent for him throughout the summer. But in that preseason finale against the Jets, you saw the flash on that play where he was able to win his rep, get after the quarterback, come through with the sack, and force the fumble. And you saw him flying around a little bit. And so that brings me to this point. With the couple of positions on this Eagles roster, will Howie Roseman side with youth or will he side with vets? Do you keep Antoine Powell-Ryland to develop him, even though he might not contribute this year, and he would occupy a spot on the 53, or do you go with the guy like Obu Okoronkwo, Azeez Ojulari, Patrick Johnson, who are veteran players who did more throughout the summer, in training camp and in the preseason, along the offensive line? Do you keep a player like Cam Williams, who is raw, but has a foundational set of skills that you believe over time he can become a really solid offensive lineman, but I don't think that he's ready yet? You took him in the 6th round. He thought that he was going to go in the 3rd. I thought if he returned to Texas, which he should have in hindsight, in my opinion, he could have been a first-round pick next year in the 2026 NFL draft. But do you keep him, or do you go with the veteran who can play tackle and guard in Kendall Lamb, who kind of got worked by some backup edge rushers, but probably play a little bit better than Cam Williams? And so this is a fascinating discussion, debate, and decision-making process for Howie Roseman here. Another player who I don't think is a lock to make this team is Ainias Smith. After Johnny Wilson went down, you're thinking, okay, Ainias Smith in the preseason debut against Cincinnati had that long punt return. He caught a touchdown from Tanner McKee. The second preseason game, caught another touchdown from Kyle McCord. He had a big 3rd down catch a little bit earlier. But then in the preseason finale, Darius Cooper, John Mechie, they were taken out early in the game. Ainias Smith pretty much played the whole game. What he does have on his side is that he could be the Eagles punt returner this year. But did the Eagles save a roster spot and just use Cooper DeJean there? Or does Vic Fangio worry about him getting injured when the live bullets are flying on a punt coverage unit? But Ainias Smith kind of raised some eyebrows here with him having to play so deep into that game against the New York Jets. And if the Eagles have 5 wide receivers, I don't think he's one of the top 5 right now. I think it's A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Jahan Dotson, John Mechie, and Darius Cooper. I don't think that Ainias Smith is better, obviously, than any of those players, especially the top-end guys. And so does he get cut? The Eagles, do they monitor the waiver wire? Do they make a trade either at this position or other positions? Again, some big decisions coming up for Howie Roseman here. Also got to give a shout-out to Montrell Johnson, the UDFA running back out of Florida. Really liked the way that he was able to run the football. He finally got a bulk of the carries on Friday night. He looked good within those carries. Don't think he's going to unseat A.J. Dillon to make this 53-man roster. I think your 3 running backs are going to be Saquon, Will Shipley, and A.J. Dillon. But as a practice squad candidate here, I would like to see the Eagles develop Montrell Johnson because he has some pop and physicality to his game. Frankly, I also like Shunderick Powell, who we didn't really see much in the preseason. I think the Eagles were trying to hide him. They didn't want him putting plays on tape for another team to scoop him up. There is also a predicament here at corner. Does Perry Nickerson deserve a spot? You know what's crazy is that he is the oldest defensive player on this Eagles roster, which defensively is the youngest defense in the entire NFL and one of the cheapest defenses in the entire NFL. Since being a 6th-round pick, I believe, maybe a 7th-round pick, I believe a 6th-round pick back in 2018, he has been on 7 teams since 2018. What he has working for him is positional versatility. He can play inside and outside. And when it came down to training camp, when it came down to game action, he made a lot of plays, and he made more plays compared to other players who he was competing with and against at that cornerback spot. Had that interception on Friday against the Jets, but he did have a bad play, a blemish on the resume, when he had an awful missed tackle, which led to that touchdown. But Perry Nickerson is a veteran, but again, it goes back to that question that I posed a little bit earlier. Does Howie side with youth or vets? And sometimes those vets are better players right now, but the Eagles are also very bullish on being able to develop players. And I don't think that Dallas Gant, the linebacker, makes the team out of Toledo, but he had to play the night on Friday with that goal line stuff. Jets go for 2. They run it up the gut with Donovan Edwards, and Dallas Gant stuffed Donovan Edwards, who's a very physical back, who in the pre-draft process at the NFL Combine ran a 4.4. So he moves well, has good straight line speed, and a lot of physicality. Dallas Gant laid a huge hit on him. That ended up pretty much winning the game for Philadelphia. That's a linebacker who I'd like to see come back to the practice squad, who maybe you develop over time into a quality special teamer who impressed me throughout the preseason. The beauty of the practice squad, the Eagles believe that their player development factory and their player development process gives them a competitive edge over other teams across the NFL. How do you go against that? How do you disagree? Because they have developed players at an unbelievable rate since Nick Sirianni came here in 2021. And that is a job of a head coach. To maximize players, put them in a position to succeed, to develop them, but to put a coaching staff around that head coach to help develop some of the youth players on this roster. And we've seen a lot of players take strides in their development over time, especially just throughout the course of the preseason here. Can't wait for Tuesday. Can't wait to see what this initial Eagles 53-man roster is. I'll do a video on that right as soon as we know what that Eagles roster is. That's why you hit that subscribe button. Thanks for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. If breaking news happens, I'll be here to talk about it, and I'll catch you soon.